Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging into the world of Otto von Bismarck. Now, most people know him for, forging Germany through war, but his internal strategies were just as crucial and really complex.
Absolutely. Think about it. Europe, 1870. You've got this brand new German empire, but it's a patchwork.
Exactly. Full of diverse groups, different religions, different politics. So the real challenge wasn't just winning wars, it was governing this thing.
Mm-hmm. Holding it all together.
So our mission today is to really unpack Bismarck's domestic policies. He was the first chancellor from 1871 right up to 1890. We want to see how he navigated unifying the country, stabilizing it, making the monarchy stronger, and trying to build some kind of national unity from the inside out.
And we'll see his approach was often, well, let's just say ruthless, but also incredibly pragmatic.
Yeah.
Classic realpolitik, really. Policy driven by power and national interest, not so much ideology.
A mix of, what's the phrase, carrot and stick.
Precisely. Carrot and stick. Repression on one hand, but also some really groundbreaking reforms on the other. And this sort of state paternalism, too. The government acting like a strong father figure.
Okay, so what are the big themes we're hitting today?
We're going to look at 5 main areas. The Kulturkampf, that's the struggle with the Catholic Church, then his fight against socialism, how he dealt with minority groups, the shift to economic protectionism, and, fascinatingly, his pioneering social welfare programs.
Right, so let's start right after 1871. Germany's unified, but like you said, it's full of different groups. Bismarck's main goal is consolidating power under the monarchy. How does he even begin to tackle that?
Well, his fundamental view was that any loyalty that wasn't directly to the Prussian-dominated state, whether it was religious, socialist, ethnic, whatever, he saw it as a direct threat.
A threat to unity.
A threat to unity and state authority. So his strategy was basically assimilate or suppress. And he famously labeled certain groups Reichsfeinde, enemies of the Reich.
Enemies of the Reich. Wow. That's strong language.
It really was. And it served a purpose, right? It rallied the majority against this perceived internal enemy and solidified support for the Kaiser and the government.
Okay, so one of the first big targets for this approach was the Catholic Church and what's called the Kulturkampf, the culture struggle. Why them?
Well, Bismarck was a Protestant, and he saw the Catholic Church, especially its political wing, the Center Party, as a major obstacle. Remember, Catholics were about a third of the population.
That's a huge minority, so not insignificant.
Not at all. He worried about their loyalty to the Pope, to Rome, being stronger than their loyalty to the new German Empire.
So what did this Kulturkampf, this culture struggle actually involve? What measures did he take?
It was pretty systematic. Things like making civil marriage mandatory, taking that power away from the church, putting education under state control, controlling clergy appointments.
So the state had to approve who became a priest.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
And they dissolved religious orders, purged clergy who were also civil servants. It was a full-on assault on the church's autonomy.
The impact must have been huge.
Oh, it was severe. You had hundreds of parishes, even some bishoprics, left empty because the state wouldn't approve appointments or priests were exiled or imprisoned. Communities were left without leadership.
You'd think that would crush the church's influence. Did it work?
Well, here's the fascinating part. It completely backfired.
Really? How so?
Instead of weakening Catholicism, these measures actually galvanized the Catholic minority. They felt persecuted, under attack, and they rallied together. Their support for the Center Party just surged.
Huh. So he kind of created a more unified opposition.
Exactly. It strengthened their resolve, made the Center Party a much more powerful political force than it might have been otherwise, a real own goal, politically speaking.
Did Bismarck recognize this? Did he change course?
He did, eventually. By the late 1870s, he started rolling back many of the harshest laws. The death of Pope Pius IX, who was very hardline, helped create an opening for diplomacy.
So a pragmatic retreat.
You could say that. Though his personal dislike, maybe even hostility towards the Center Party and its leader Windthorst, that probably never went away. But he learned you couldn't just hammer them into submission.
Okay, so that's the religious front. What about the economy? You mentioned a shift there, too. He started out allied with the liberals.
Yeah, initially in the early 1870s, he worked with the National Liberals. They supported free trade, economic modernization, things that helped unify the country economically.
But then things changed.
Yes, the mid-1870s saw a significant economic downturn. People called it the Great Depression back then. This put a lot of pressure on industries and agriculture.
And who's putting on the pressure?
You had powerful landowners, the Junkers, the Prussian aristocracy who were hurting from cheap grain imports, especially from America and Russia. And you also had heavy industrialists wanting protection from foreign competition.
So the free trade consensus started to break down,
Completely. And Bismarck saw a political opportunity too.
which led to
A major U-turn. In 1878-79, he pushed through tariffs on imported iron and grain, a big shift to protectionism.
and the political fallout from ditching the liberals and embracing tariffs.
It was huge. It basically marked the end of the liberal era in German politics, and certainly the end of Bismarck's alliance with them.
Who did he align with instead?
He solidified his support with the conservative bloc. That's the landowners, the industrialists, the military, the high-ranking civil servants. These were groups generally opposed to more democracy anyway.
And the grain tariffs specifically helped the Junkers.
Absolutely. It protected their economic interests, kept them powerful, and, crucially, ensured their loyalty to the monarchy and the existing system. It was a way of cementing the conservative foundation of the Reich.
Okay, so he's managing religious conflict, shifting economic policy. But another challenge is bubbling up, right? Socialism.
Yes, a huge one in his eyes. Rapid industrialization meant a fast-growing urban working class. Many were drawn to the Social Democratic Party, the SPD, which had a Marxist ideology.
And Bismarck saw this as
A fundamental threat, a revolutionary threat to the monarchy, to the social order, to everything he was trying to build.
So how did he respond? More suppression.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
He used 2 failed assassination attempts on Kaiser Wilhelm I in 1878, even though the socialists weren't directly involved as the perfect excuse.
An excuse to crack down.
Exactly. He pushed through the anti-socialist laws later that year. These were incredibly harsh.
What did they actually do?
They banned socialist organizations, meetings, newspapers. Police could just expel socialist leaders from cities. Any kind of socialist agitation was suppressed. The idea was to just crush the movement entirely.
So the stick again. Did this one work?
Well, here's the other paradox. Despite all this repression, the socialist movement, the support for the SPD, it just kept growing underground.
Really? Even with the bans and police action?
Yes. It seems the repression might have even strengthened their resolve, created martyrs, and solidified worker loyalty to the party. By 1890, when the laws lapsed, the SPD was actually much stronger politically.
So repression alone wasn't the answer here either.
It clearly wasn't. It showed the limits of just using force against a popular movement driven by real social conditions.
Which brings us to the carrot. Bismarck realized he needed something more than just the stick, right?
Precisely. This is where he shows that remarkable pragmatism again. He recognized that you couldn't just outlaw socialism. You had to address some of the workers' grievances, steal the socialist thunder, if you like.
So this is the Zuckerbrod und Peich the carrot and stick approach fully realized.
Absolutely. Combine the harsh anti-socialist laws, the stick, with pioneering social welfare reforms, the carrot.
And his motive wasn't exactly altruistic.
Not primarily. It was deeply pragmatic. The goal was to win workers' loyalty, bind them to the state, make them feel the state cared for them, and therefore make revolutionary socialism less appealing. State paternalism again.
Okay, so what were these groundbreaking welfare measures, these carrots?
They were truly revolutionary for the time. First, the Health Insurance Act of 1883. This gave workers medical care and sick pay if they couldn't work.
Wow, in the 1880s.
Yeah. Then came the Accident Insurance Act in 1884, compensation for injuries on the job. Huge for industrial workers.
Okay.
And finally, the Old Age and Disability Insurance Act in 1889. This set up a pension system for workers when they got too old or became disabled.
So basically, health insurance, workers' comp, and Social Security all rolled out in the 1880s.
Pretty much. It was the foundation of the modern welfare state. No other country had anything like it on this scale at the time.
That must have had a massive impact.
Immense. It set a precedent that influenced social policy across the globe, including Britain, the U.S., much later on. It showed that the state could play a role in providing Social Security. A calculated move by Bismarck, yes, but with enormous long-term consequences.
Beyond these big groups, Catholics, socialists, workers,
Right.
did he have specific policies for ethnic minorities? You mentioned the Poles earlier.
He did. The goal, especially with the large Polish population in the eastern provinces, was Germanization.
Trying to make them German.
Essentially, yes. Policies included things like banning the Polish language in schools, promoting German settlement in those areas, trying to enforce German culture. There was similar, though perhaps less intense, pressures on other groups too, like Danes in the north or Alsatians in the west. Policies towards Jews were more complex and shifted over time, but the overall drive was towards national homogeneity under Prussian leadership.
And did these Germanization policies work any better than the Kulturkampf?
Not really. Much like the Kulturkampf, they often provoked resistance and actually strengthened the national identity of the very groups they were trying to assimilate. It created deep resentment that lasted for generations.
So looking back at Bismarck's whole domestic agenda, it's this real mix, isn't it? Repression and reform side by side.
Definitely. A complex interplay. You have to acknowledge his successes. He did stabilize the new empire, navigated immense challenges, and, well, he accidentally invented the welfare state, or at least its foundations.
But the costs were high.
They were. The campaigns against Catholic socialist minorities, they left deep scars and divisions in German society. And his methods were fundamentally authoritarian.
How so?
Well, he relied on strengthening the monarchy and the executive, often bypassing or manipulating the Reichstag, the parliament. While he introduced universal male suffrage, real power remained concentrated. This reliance on top-down control, on realpolitik, and sometimes outright force, limited genuine political participation.
So it kind of delayed Germany's democratic development.
Arguably, yes. His legacy is that blend of pragmatic state-building, sometimes ruthless suppression, and that unexpected paternalistic reform, using both the stick and the carrot to forge and maintain unity.
It leaves us with a lot to think about. As you, our listener, reflect on Bismarck's legacy, what does it teach us about that constant tension? The tension between, say, state authority, the need for social reform, and individual liberties.
And maybe ask yourself, how do these approaches from over a century ago still echo in debates we have today about the government's role, about national unity, about how we manage dissent or integrate diverse populations? It's history that still feels very relevant.